Welcome to the Hall of Fame Fatherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Mistovich. Today, I'm joined by Ryan McWade. Now, normally I give an introduction, but since literally Ryan and I just met, I will give that duty over to Ryan to give an introduction. So, Ryan, thank you for joining me on today's podcast. And if you would, give us a bit about your origin story and take it from there.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I'm 43 years old. I'm from Seattle, Washington, born and raised here. Grew up by playing all kinds of sports and baseball, football, basketball, kind of everything. Ended up going to a local church, pretty high school type range. Got married pretty young. I was 21. Had kids when I was 27 and 29. So now they're 16 and 14. Been a fireman for 19 years. And I just kind of doing the professional thing and the father thing. And 2017, my kids got relocated to California, so I jumped back and forth between Washington and California monthly, and just make the most of the time that I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. So obviously, I'm here to honor and highlight fathers, and that's obviously why you're here. I want to dive into your story. You mentioned a little bit about becoming a father at 27 and 29, and the two children, and being relocated to California. Like, what's your first start off, if you wouldn't mind sharing like a little bit about your father-son relationship, with your own dad, and what was that like, and kind of how did that inform you and how you play your role as a father?
All right. So mine is kind of I don't know if it'd be the opposite of what someone would expect, but so my dad to me was always the example of what not to be as a father. So not a great relationship. Just unfortunately wasn't really a great man. Spent time in jail, and I had to call the cops on him before for hitting my mom. Just not the example that you would want. But what I in turn did was I just made him the example of what not to be. And so I kind of used that experience. I know some people kind of fall into going down the same road or whatever, but that was just never going to be the case for me. So for me, my main father, like parental type, who I would look up to, would be my grandfather, my mom's side. And so he was kind of my idol growing up. As I got older, of course, I learned that he wasn't as perfect as what I always thought, but it doesn't matter because he's just kind of always that person to me, right? So, he was just a very hard worker, loved his family, took care of his family, always took me to church when I'd go to visit them in Spokane. I'd always go along church with him, so that was my first exposure there. And just I don't know, I always loved my grandpa. Ended up naming my son after him, and that's kind of my experience there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's yes, especially the relationship with your biological father. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yep.
So go ahead and dive into what your experience is. Obviously, got a story there, and want to hear what your fathership journey has looked like.
Yeah, so man, it was so from the beginning I just wanted to have boys because I'm into sports, and so
Okay.
I only wanted boys because that was going to be fun and that was going to be easy. And then of course my daughter was the firstborn, and man, I cannot tell you, like, just immediately it was like the greatest thing ever was having a little girl. And just like in the hospital room, like, I don't know, right after she's born, like all of a sudden she's just daddy's girl, and she had me wrapped around her finger, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate with my schedule as a fireman, that I work a third of the time, and we work 24-hour shifts. So it would work out to just over 100 shifts a year about. And so I would get to be with them for all day, especially in those beginning years. My son came 2 years later, and so especially those ages, before school, it's like I'd be gone for 24 hours at a time, but then I'd be home with them for 24 hours. And so I would get, like, I always told people would ask me, what's my favorite thing about being a fireman? Well, once my kids were born, my favorite thing about being a fireman was that I got to spend so much time with my kids. So, but yeah, especially those early years were just amazing. And then then they started growing up, and it's funny, I just wanted boys for athletes, and my daughter's the athlete. My son, he could care less. So it's kind of funny how the world works. But yeah, so I don't know, they're just my little buddies, come home from shift, and didn't really matter how beat up I was, like just hanging out with them was kind of what made me happy. So really good relationship with them. Fast forward, let's see, I think it was 2014, end of 2014, when I separated from my ex-wife. And so my daughter was born in 05, so kids were like 9 and 7, if I'm doing the math right.
Okay.
That was pretty hard. Like, I think subconsciously I knew that it could happen, that we would divorce. But honestly, I would have stuck out, like, kind of any situation, because I just felt like I was gonna, not only was it gonna be devastating for kids, but I thought, that I would get the short end of the stick, and lose, time with the kids and stuff like that. But so that happened. Kind of kids had to grow up really fast. And then go ahead.
Let me just, how did you help them through that transition period? What did that process look like?
Well, we got them into counseling pretty quick. And then just like for me, I made sure to never say anything bad about their mom, and just tried to, give them extra love. My daughter, she's the thinker for sure, and she always wanted to know the details. And so I always told her when she got older, or old enough, I'd be able to give her details, but she was too young. She never liked that. She still doesn't like that, actually, even at 16. But yeah, just kind of keep doing the same thing that we're doing. And making them feel loved and making them the priority. Um, they didn't ever seem to be insecure about it, but it was hard. I mean, the drop offs, especially in the beginning, I
Mm.
mean, they were pretty brutal, but I don't know. People always say kids are resilient, like, oh, kids are so resilient, but I kind of hate that because I didn't want my kids to have to be resilient. I just wanted them to grow up in this, I don't know. I don't want to say fantasy land because some kids get those experiences, right? So,
Mhm.
I just wanted their experience to be different than mine, and it just their experience was completely different than mine, but it wasn't the perfect experience that I wanted them to have. So,
Gotcha. How was the relationship with like you and your ex-wife, and were you guys a team and focusing on the kids and making sure they're okay? Like, how did you navigate that?
oh, the relationship was terrible.
Okay.
um, but I will say that, like, we would like fight, but then we would, when it came to like dealing with the kids, we would, for the most part, it was civil and make the decisions based on the kids, and none
That's
of the
good.
fighting none of the fighting ever happened in front of the kids. So our situation was a little out of the norm because her family was all kind of siding with me, I guess, and
Okay.
so that made things difficult. um, the kids had a really good, really strong relationship with her mother, but then she stopped taking the kids to see her mother, and so then the only way for them to do that was through me. And um, that situation's not ideal for sure.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that um, I don't know. It was kind of a struggle for us. It was a struggle for everyone, but I think that we did a decent job of not saying negative things about the other person to the kids.
Mhm.
We get along fine now.
That's
Now
good.
it's good. We'll get together sometimes for lunch and just kind of talk about the kids and stuff. But that beginning period, when everything was fresh, was rough. And then she ended up, while we were going through our divorce, she met someone from California. So we went to court because she wanted to relocate the kids to California. So that was brutal. And then so tensions were high.
Yeah.
But once she was able to move, and I joke about it, once she got what she wanted, like, we got along fine. So
Okay.
yeah.
So your kids got relocated to California. How do you navigate seeing them? What does that look like with you living in Washington?
Yeah, so my plan was, if they got relocated, my plan was to quit my job and just go get a different job. So, like, I went down and I took a test to be an elevators union. This was before the trial even happened because I felt like I saw the writing on the wall.
Okay.
But then I started thinking, like, well, in the summertime, the kids are not going to have school and I'm going to be stuck at work. So what's the point of this? So started looking at my schedule, and thankfully the way my schedule works is I got the ability to do trades with people. And so people are sympathetic to my situation. So people do a lot of trades. So I'll basically work like a full month's worth of shifts in in about 15 days. And then I've got 13 days that I can go and be with kids. So, and thankfully she agreed, because I think in the court documents, once they were allowed to relocate, the judge gave me 1 week a month, and then told me that it was quality of time, not quantity of time, which bothered me quite a bit.
Yeah.
But thankfully she was agreeable to do the 15-13 split. So yeah, I'm in Seattle for 15 nights, and then I'm in California for 12 nights, actually, is what it is. So and then I've got an apartment down there, and when I'm there, I'm not working, so I just have the kids full time, and yeah.
Wow. That's great that you have the ability, with your job, to work your schedule out like that, and your coworkers helping you out, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I thought about testing down in California to be a fireman, but then since she moved once already, I was pretty concerned that she might move again, and so right now with my seniority, I get a lot more vacation time than a brand new guy. So I was thinking, worst case scenario, I could get stuck down there in California as a bottom of the ladder again, and her move somewhere, not necessarily not to get away from me, but just because she wants to move. And then so I was like, all right, well, this isn't ideal, but yeah, I was able to make the best of it. I've been doing that since end of 2017.
Wow. Well, I definitely commend your dedication. That is that's awesome. So how do you navigate, seeing your family and, other relatives, I'm assuming live where you live?
Yeah. I've got 2 sisters that are close, a brother that lives in Georgia, actually. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I don't have a ton of time here. I do have the kids for half of the summer. For all the summers, they just come up here. So
Okay.
I get them for half the summers, and then every other Thanksgiving, every other Christmas, and so they're used to flying on their own. They get put on a plane, and they're definitely used to that. So that's kind of most of the time when I see the family and stuff, is when especially when they're up here, because we're spent all of our time with family. But yeah, and then my sisters live close enough to where we'll hang out on weekends, when we can, or whatever. But both my parents have passed, so it's just me and my kids and my siblings.
Gotcha. And you mentioned a little bit about the court and what the judge told you about quality of time. In my fatherhood experience, I had zero experience with court, and I hear stories. Would you mind delving into what your experience is going through that system?
Yeah, sure. So I didn't ever have any experience with court or the legal system. I'm a fireman. I've got a clean record. Never gotten in trouble or anything like that. So this was kind of my first exposure to everything. I'm not a big fan of lawyers. I feel like they're the only ones that win in any of this. There's a lot of technicalities. So when I had my when my ex lived here with the kids, we had it set up so that I had the kids on my 4 off stretches and then 1 6 off stretch a month. And it worked out to like 50-50 pretty much. But on the last day that I had the kids, it didn't make sense to have them spend the night and then wake them up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take them to their mom. So what I would do is after dinner time, I would take them home. Well, when they were going through the custody, I was arguing that I had them for the same amount of days, but in the court's eyes, it's who has them for the most overnights. So that last day on every trip counted as an overnight for my ex. And so that made her the primary, she had primary custody.
Okay.
And in the court's eyes, the person with primary custody is going to make the best decisions for the kids. And so even though I had her mom and her sister willing to testify on my behalf to not relocate the kids, the judge chose to not even listen to them. The guardian ad litem is a court appointed, I'm not sure if they're attorneys or not, but they're appointed from the court, and they'll spend time with, she came to my house, spent time with me and my kids, and then talked to my kids individually, and then spent time with my kids with their mother. And she's supposed to kind of be the court's eyes outside of the courtroom. And she wrote up a report and suggested against relocation. And what it came down to was my ex was the primary custodian, or I forget the term, but yeah, just let her go. And so obviously I was, pretty devastated. Saying goodbye to them in a Home Depot parking lot with their vehicle all packed up, and it was pretty brutal. So my opinion of the court system and stuff like that is, I don't know, it's not very high. I feel like I understand kind of why it's that way, but I don't know. I feel like dads don't get a fair shake, especially in Washington. I think actually in California it's a little bit better. In Washington, the judges rotate between criminal law and family law.
Okay.
And so I feel like maybe they're not maybe experts in one or the other, but they kind of got to do both. Whereas I've talked to other fathers in California, and it sounds like the judges there are either criminal or family. And the dads I've talked to have said that, they kind of shoot for 50-50 and a more shared time, because I don't know. I think that if you're a good parent, like, a kid needs both a mother and a father. So
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
You would hope that would be the default
Right.
setting, that they would try to go 50-50.
Right. And
I
mean, if she were staying here and we were fighting for time, I don't know, maybe it would have been different. Maybe it'd be more 50-50, but also my schedule is wacky. So it's, it's not like I can do a week on, week off with my shift schedule. So,
right.
But it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah. I know some Ohioans that have gone through separations and gone through the court system, and it seems like the default here is 50-50. Obviously, I'm picking from a select few.
Sure.
But hopefully that becomes a standard across the board. and, taken by a by case basis, obviously, where mom or dad aren't fit to be a parent,
Right.
Then things need to be changed, but.
Sure.
And, yeah, that's, I consider myself lucky that I never had to go through that as a father.
Yeah.
And so thank you for sharing that experience. Appreciate it. So what would you say is the biggest lesson that you learned through your journey?
So the common thread of advice that I got before my kids were born and while they were young was how fast time goes and how fast they grow up.
Mhm.
So that was like the consistent advice. I'd hear other things as well, but consistently that's kind of what I always heard. And so I kind of, the way I always framed it in my head was, at the end of my life, what am I going to regret? And I don't think people regret or I'm getting lost in my thoughts. People aren't going to be, thinking that they're so glad that they picked up all those extra overtime shifts or worked all those extra weekends to get ahead in the company. And it's always about family and friends and stuff like that. And so I think for me, it was like, the one thing I'm not going to regret is not spending the time with my kids. I know they're going to grow up super fast. And so I know we're going to have a great relationship after they're 18, but especially until they're 18, it's like they're the number one priority. They still enjoy hanging out with me, so I want to be able to. I still want to eat up all that time,
Yeah.
So that's my main thing. It's like, what am I willing to regret? And it's like, yeah, I can have these other regrets and it's not going to be a big deal. But one thing I'm not going to regret is missing out on time with my kids. So it's kind of what's gotten me through and how I frame things in my own head.
No, I like it. In my experience, being a young father, I didn't frame it in such a way. I was out chasing the experiences and stuff, and sometimes I sacrificed time with my son. And
Yeah.
looking back now, that's a regret that I have. So I definitely get where you're coming from, and yeah, it's definitely a lesson learned. With all the things that you do to maintain your relationship with your kids, what is it what example are you trying to set for them? What is it you're hoping to leave them, teach them, etc.?
The main thing I try to do is teach them to think for themselves. Well, like as far as I go, I want them to just know that I'm always here and I'm always going to love them, and regardless of decisions they make or mistakes they make, I let them know that we all make, mistakes. And but like when things come up in the world or politics or whatever they're being taught in school, I just try to get them to think for themselves, because I know I'm not always gonna be there to help lead them through something, so I kind of hope that they hear my voice or whatever. I always talk to my kids about normalization of deviance. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term at all.
No, please explain.
Oh, it's I think it was developed when the Challenger space shuttle went down.
Okay.
And what had happened was there was a piece of the space shuttle that wasn't quite up to spec, but they'd launched before and it was fine. And so basically the deviance was not correcting the situation like they should have, and then they had a good outcome, so then they normalize it. So it would be like let's say you drive home drunk from the bar. Well, the best thing that can happen is for something bad to happen. Maybe not, you know, you don't kill someone, but maybe you wreck your car, right? So there's some sort of consequence, because if there's no consequence, there's a good chance that you just think, well, next time you do it again because you started to normalize it. So whenever I see something happen or whatever, sometimes my daughter will like look at me and she's like, yeah, normalization of deviance. Like, yep. So I don't know. It's just like little things like that. Like I just try to talk to him a lot. I feel like my daughter can talk to me about just about anything. Of course, there's going to be some things that are going to feel uncomfortable or whatever. But I remember my ex talking about how her dad wouldn't let her date and would never talk to her about things and stuff like that. So I kind of use that as like, I kind of learned from, apparently I learned from like bad parenting, right? So I'm like, well, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
So just a good conversation with them and let them know they can talk to me. I'm not going to snap on them. For me, a lot of times I was always told no about if I'd asked to do something or whatever, they'd tell me no, but they wouldn't ever tell me why. And so I always try to explain the whys. Like, this is what I'm thinking, because I feel like they don't learn if you just tell them yes or no, so I'm kind of lay out the scenario like, well, this is why I don't want you in the park when it's dark. It's because of this or that, or, as a parent, this is what I'm thinking. It's not just, no, and leave it at that. So I try to make life, learning lessons out of a lot of different things without being annoying, because the kids, at some point, I start repeating myself, but I don't know. I want them to think for themselves. I want them to have come up with their own idea of how the world works. They know where I stand on things, and they also know that, like, I'm okay if they don't think the same way. It's 100% okay. And I'm gonna love them either way. So just kind of be there and be present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Critical thinking is definitely a big one nowadays. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I typically, the name of the podcast is Hall of Fame Fatherhood Podcast, and it's I'm by no means the guy who defines that. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I'm hoping throughout this process, like, I'm able to tease out some semblance of what that looks like, objectively. And so I like to ask, like, the last question is, how would you define a Hall of Fame father?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that being present, I think that's I think that's gotta be in the very top, because if you're not present, then what good are you really? I mean, you know, the kids need you there, not for the good stuff. They need you there for the bad stuff too, you know, that comes along, or whatever. I think being present and just making the kids feel safe, you know, that they can have conversations with you. Yeah, present, security. I think those just go a long ways. I think some people get wrapped up in different areas or whatever, but I mean, for me, it was never really about being like, you know, a Hall of Fame father. It was, I almost feel like I told you kind of when we're just talking, like it feels weird to ever get praise for doing this or doing that, because I almost feel like I do it for myself in a way. I mean, just because I love my kids so much, like, but yeah, I would say, like, if my son were to ask, you know, what was important, I would just say, just being there for your kids and providing, but don't get lost in what providing means. You know, providing is a lot of different things. It's not just financial. It's, you know, providing that the time and the security and the relationship and all that stuff. So it's a balance, and just, you know, don't let that precious time slip away that you have with them.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good note to end on. And time does go by fast, you know, with the kids, and it is paramount that we spend as much time as we can with them. So thank you for sharing.
Yep.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
But you can't make them weird. You got to let them go out and do their own thing too.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, you got to give them that space to learn.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, Ryan, thank you for, you know, sharing your journey, and appreciate you taking the time with me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, and good luck with your podcast. And seems like it's a good thing.
Thank you. Appreciate that.